Hey everyone, this is a quick call out to listeners in the Los Angeles area. Coming up on Thursday, March 5th, will be the 4th annual Tonebenders Los Angeles Sound Design Meetup, presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. Starting at 7 p.m., this is a totally free gathering of people working in sound for films, games, and series to hang out and share some stories and a lot of laughs. No need to RSVP, just come out and catch up with old friends and colleagues and hopefully make a bunch of new friends as well. Last year, we outgrew the venue that we had been using, so this year we will be at a new location that should give us a lot more elbow room. So let's all head over to All Season Brewing at 800 South La Brea Avenue. If you can come, please seek me out and make sure you say hi. I want to meet as many people from the LA sound community that night as I can. Please feel free to spread the word to anyone you think would be a good fit. Although the title says Sound Design Meetup, this is also a night for mixers, Foley teams, supervisors, assistants, stage techs, composers. You get the idea. So that's Thursday, March 5th, 7 p.m. at All Season Brewing. I hope to see you all there. You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. This is the show where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. If you work in sound design, post, or game audio, you already know how much time the right library can save you. For the month of February, get 50% off any Sound Ideas membership tier, no matter which level of access you need. That's half off of the entire professionally recorded sound effects catalog, from cinematic and broadcast to hard-to-find specialty sounds. Just head to sound-ideas.com and use the promo code TONEBENDERS50 at checkout. Hello and welcome to Tonebenders. My name is Tim Muirhead and I am super excited to talk with the Oscar-nominated sound team behind director Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, One Battle After Another. This is a movie full of kinetic energy that moves forward to bring the audience along with it and keeps viewers on the edge of their seats scene after scene. I saw it in the theater and I loved this film. This is one of my favorite movies of not only last year, but of a really long time. The energy in it just kept me so engrossed in the film the entire way. And part of what brought that energy was the sound team. And I'm lucky enough to talk to them today. First up, we have One Battle After Another's production sound mixer, José Antonio García. It's great to meet you, José. Thanks for joining me.
Likewise, my friend Timothy.
We also have re-recording mixer, supervising sound editor, and sound designer Chris Scarabosio. You were previously on Tonebenders talking about the modern master Wes Anderson's film, The French Dispatch, in episode 178, so you clearly have a good working relationship with these great modern directors. Welcome back to Tonebenders, Chris.
Nice to see you again, Tim. Thanks for having us.
Finally, we have One Battle After Another's re-recording mixer, Tony Villaflor. It's wonderful to talk to you today, Tony. We've never met before. I'm happy to see you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It's great to meet you too.
Well, I guess my first question will relate to what I said in the intro. This movie has a crackling energy to it. It feels like it's constantly propulsing forward and keeping the audience on the edge of their seat, not knowing exactly where things are going to go. Chris, in another interview that I read, you mentioned that the director, Paul Thomas Anderson, uses the phrase widen the screen. And in that interview, you just kind of toss that off. I'm wondering if maybe with the three of you, we can dig deeper into that idea of what widening the screen means. Maybe, Chris, you want to take that first?
Sure. I mean, it starts with production, and Jose certainly did an excellent job getting us all the great performances that we had some challenges, but it starts there with Paul's movies for sure. He gets these great actors that give us these amazing performances. And then we start building around that. And this film has tons of tension built into it. I've worked with Paul over 20 years. He doesn't always want the films to sound modern in the way where you expand the scope of the film. So when I watched the first 75 minutes of this movie, the first thing I asked him is like, how big can we go with this thing? Because it feels super cinematic, super engaging. And he's never worked in ATMOS before.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't even think we've done 7 with them. I said, I think we should go for it. I think we should do Atmos because I think this movie deserves it. It wants it. And let's just make it as cinematic and as big and as powerful as possible. As our conversations started and we started working on the movie, there was one scene where we pan across, and this is later, it's about halfway through the film where we're panning across. The soldiers are shooting at Bob on the hill. And as we pan, like one of the things he mentioned, and this was early on still, let's make the screen as wide as possible. And so we did some various tests and tried some various things. And then we just started integrating that into the whole film. I started out by doing the first 15 minutes of the movie the way as kind of a test to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I'm kind of tried making it as big as possible. And he was like, yeah, this is great. So it's kind of where we started. And then we just, as we got into the mix, Tony can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, he just seemed like so into it. Like once we got to the dub stage, like Chris was saying, we were mixing in Atmos. There was going to be a big IMAX, 12.0 release of it. It felt like he was really leaning into making it as cinematic as possible with sound. Yeah, another like Paul quote, big movie energy with all these like big cinematic, like sprawling scenes. I think he wanted to kind of see how, like Chris was saying, see how far he can go with it. And I think the first 20 minutes is a really good example of that. Like it moves and it's big and it's sprawling as we get into the camp there and they're sneaking around. There's like the trucks that are going by and they're going into the overheads and the surrounds. And once the flares start going, they're all objects that are going, over your head back into the surround. So, and that's all stuff he really wanted. He really wanted to see how far you could take that. And yeah, it was pretty cool to have him kind of dialed into mixing in that format.
Yeah, I remember on Punch Drunk Love, try to sneak stuff into the surrounds and Paul would be like, no, we're not doing that. Try to sneak stuff into the sub. No, we're not doing that. So like, it's just a great example of him recognizing the fact that we can use sound to really enhance the film. And he really embraced that. So I just wanted to add that.
I can't imagine this film being like a stereo experience. Like this film has to be a surround film. Especially the protest scenes we'll get into later, but the immersiveness of the sound really makes it feel urgent, I guess, is what I'm saying. Jose, do you want to talk about recording? Maybe let's dig into that. Halfway through the film, there's a riot scene. There's a couple scenes where we see all the rioters, and there's other scenes where they're just present in the background. But Jose, do you want to talk about being on set for those scenes?
What really impressed me about Paul was the risks, or not risks, because how he embraces grit in sound and in the film as well. I mean, as you said, it's a very big scoped film, but also it's very intimate at the same time. I mean, in that particular scene, they were, we try to plant microphones everywhere so they can, build around the ATMOS spectrum, but also, like a lot of wiring. I mean, that scene was very, very loud. So the only chance that you have to, unless the boom is right here, it's the wires. Basically, we wire everybody as much as we can, try to fill in the spatial sounds with plants all over the place. And then Tony and Chris did their magic and, paraded those sounds across the ATMOS universe. And it really worked beautiful.
One of the things I loved about that scene is that although there are a couple moments where they send in Eddie Van Halen and such like that, the majority of the protest scene is happening either in the building or on the roof, and we're not actually seeing the protest, but we're hearing it the entire time. The energy of it is going the entire time. Chris or Tony, do you want to talk about building that off-screen world?
That was one of the scenes where, as we started working on the film, I'm always interested to find out with the director where they might be having problems with sound so we can address those as soon as possible. I think the sooner you get the big stuff out of the way, then it's a lot easier. I'm in contact with Andy and Paul as much as possible.
Andy's the picture editor?
Yeah, Andy Jurgensen. Yeah, and he was like, the riot can be tighter. Let's try and make that, in his words, we're tighter. And so Rich Quinn, the dialogue editor, I said, let's find as much as they got in production. So he built out those chants and made it as big as possible. and it also in sync in some kind of a cadence. Like he worked on the cadence throughout to kind of give it that, like you're in the riot. With sound effects, we're building out kind of general crowds and reactions and that kind of stuff. So we ran that throughout the whole scene. And then, as we mixed it, we found when to feature the stuff that was more big crowd and then more intimate crowd and then stuff that's off screen. And then we also have the score during that whole sequence is kind of incredible. It's like a 23-minute piece, totally chaotic piece of music. The human voice is one of those things that evokes the most emotion out of people. So leaning into that and those chants were kind of like the focal point. The Lockjaw gets there and he's like, whatever, like he's unfazed, but it's like this whole thing is happening and then people are fired up. So, just trying to create that chaos. And then the music, is one of those things where really leaning into the ATMOS, made a couple passes, kind of got it in shape. And then I was like, well, what would happen if I started taking some of these piano runs and drum fills and started kind of moving around the room, especially when I'm feeling like this is the most chaotic part of the scene, just to really kind of amp it up, or kind of comedic too, because in some ways I felt like some of those crazy piano runs represented Bob and his paranoia, his anxiety, his tension. And then there's the contrast of the military guys who are actual military guys, except for Lockjaw, how they're just kind of calm and they're just like, we're going to get these guys. We're going to take them down. There's all these dispositions that are happening, and the music and the sound effects, there's bombs going off, fireworks, firecrackers, people yelling, skateboarders. I mean, there's like cars, there's all kinds of stuff happening. We just spent a lot of time kind of working all those things and trying to build this dynamic tension, build and release kind of moments. And, the way it was cut and the way it's directed, then you cut to some comedy. You got Bob running into the thing and he's trying to find the phone charger, and there's the young guy on his phone. And, it's just, there's all these crazy things happening. So we're just trying to represent, bring sound into all of that to kind of represent and heighten all that.
Yeah, with a scene like that, there's so much like opportunity. Like you're saying, that piece of score, it's like what, like 20 minutes long or something like that. And it moves from when Lockjaw shows up and it's Pinche Puercos to Bob going through Sensei's house to Bob on the rooftop and then falls down. Like you cover so much ground in that 20 minutes. There is a cool marriage of production and sound effects and music. Like you really get like all of the elements to play with there. And you just cover so much ground. And like mix wise, you kind of have to keep like pulling focus to like each of these things, moving to all these different locations. And you're hitting comedy, the fear and terror of being in a riot. So like you're just covering all this emotional ground. And like there's something to pulling focus with sound to like each of these individual moments throughout this 20-minute piece.
It's also got the comedy, as you said, like when everything kind of just stops and he falls down the tree.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I pulled for that I normally don't is at the very end of that, he falls a tree, he gets up, he starts running, then he gets tasered. And that fall is kind of funny. And instead of putting just a body fall, there was a big drum kind of fill hit there that was kind of comedic. It kind of reminded me of Buster Keaton kind of moment. And we just like leaned into that. So like,
and I think that's all there is.
Yeah, I think it's just the drum hit for him falling after he gets hit by the taser, and he's just out. And it's just that we just went for it with the drums instead of putting in a body fall. So just kind of things like that happen in a mix when you're collaborating. It's fun and it's creative and it's collaborative.
And that was just like the perfect period, the perfect exclamation point to the end of that whole scene.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of comedy, there is an amazing car chase sequence at the end of the film that is very different than we're used to for car chases. Normally, car chases are very quickly edited. There's pounding music, heavy metal music, guitar-driven music. This car chase is actually quite a long scene and involves a lot of looking in the rearview mirror. And then the tension is being built, and then we hear DiCaprio's car pull up with this high-pitched zzz to it that breaks the tension, and actually it's a sound effect that's all on its own, but it makes you laugh, which is very rare that a sound effect gets to do that, break the tension. Maybe we can start with Jose, if we can just kind of talk about how that whole scene came together and how it was built. Jose, how do you mic up all these actors in the cars and such for all these shots?
Well, that's mostly lavaliers and also lavaliers planted on the visor. Bob's car, as you said, it has like this decrepit muscle car type of sound, but it's ridiculously funny, as you said. So we ended up miking that car a lot. Most of the sound, I believe, came from the exhaust, from the back, because that's where mostly the funny sound was emanating from. But we did a lot of what we used to call them stunt miking, because, we would like have to get under the car and clip and, try to protect the mic and all that. The sound of Bob's car was real.
Wow.
I mean, since the time it arrived to the set, it's like, what?
Do you often mic up cars as a production sound mixer? Or
No. Actually, this is one of the, unless it's a very specific one, but, we talked with Chris before, and, he was kind of worried about trying to get all the sounds from the cars. So that was a request from Chris as well. But also, with the camera we were using, it was a very loud camera. So I was always looking for something to mask the camera noise. And we said the specificity of Bob's car was too much to not mic it. He was like, we have to mic this.
Chris, were you in conversation with Jose about that ahead of time?
Yes. When I read the script, I said, hey, sounds like there's going to be a lot of cars in this movie. Knowing our director, Paul, if there's something great that's on set, I know we're going to be in the mix. And he's going to be like, man, that car had the best sound. It'll just get better and better in his mind if we don't have it. So we got to just try. The cars are on set. I know it's like the last thing they're thinking about when they're filming, but anything we can get, even if it's just for a reference, that's important. But let's just try and get whatever we can. Let's actually put some energy in. And everybody was kind of behind it. But as usual, it's like, 2 days before they're going to start shooting it, it's like, oh, we're going to be shooting that tomorrow or whatever. And it's like, oh, man. So then, I got in contact with Jose because, there was talk of either me going or me sending somebody down there or Jose getting another person. For me, it was really important to try and get as much of that kind of stuff as we could. And fortunately, Bob's was really the car that is so kind of iconic and hilarious. We got some nice things from the Mustang as well that we were able to integrate, but mostly we rebuilt the Mustang and the Charger. Bob's car, man, it's maxing out and it's hilarious. In that moment, I know exactly, because pretty much every time we went through this in the mix, I laughed every time I get to that moment. It's great that Jose was able to kind of get the coverage that we really needed.
That's impressive. So, Tony, were you on sound effects on the faders?
Yeah, I make sound effects.
We've got 3 cars chasing. How are you going about kind of separating them in the mix, and how do you ask for those tracks to be delivered to you?
Effects editor, his name's JD, Justin Doyle. He's amazing. He cut the shit out of that scene. You know what I mean? And organizationally speaking, if I can have one pre-dub that's, the Mustang, one pre-dub that's the Charger, one pre-dub that's Bob's car, that's helpful to just, once we get in the final mix and we're there kind of doing it live, like, I have the separation of that stuff. Yeah, that was a tricky scene to kind of figure out in general, because it's so much more than just those 3 cars, but it's also like different and it's kind of a little more nuanced, just in the sense that like you're saying, it's such a different kind of car chase. Even just looking at the image of what you have to work with is so much different. It's moving in a different way, and what you're looking at is so much different than, a car chase, quote unquote. So Chris and I spent a lot of time mixing that scene, and Paul, there's 3 of us kind of just like going through that scene pass after pass after pass, and like collaboration and a lot of like hard work and creative thinking of like, what's the scene about? It's ultimately about like tension, anxiety, and kind of and the release of all that at the end when Bob gets reunited with Willa there. It's such a different palette to work with. You don't have like the normal kind of Hollywood contemporary palette of sounds to work with, just because that's not what you're really looking at. You know what I mean? So that first third of it, it's really just like Willow. And it's her like freaking out that something might be behind her before she spots something that's actually behind her. So we have a lot of car rattles and rear view mirror rattles and, side view mirror rattles and suspension kind of stuff. So just like building that anxiety, there's a really great, and this is like an Andy, picture editor Andy thing, but there's a seatbelt ding that's going off the whole time. Ding, 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 ding. Because like, why would she bother to put her seatbelt on? Like it would have been too much work. So it's like the little kind of more not nuanced details like that, I think, that kind of add to the tension of that scene. And, there definitely becomes a point more towards the back half where you get to play more with like engine sounds and cars and making sure that each character, you can kind of track each character through, the ups and downs of the hills and stuff like that. It was a tricky one. Yeah. Chris and I sat there for a long time and really like deconstruct it a little bit and really work through it to get it to be ultimately, where it was.
Sometimes I think people forget that listening is a real-time activity. You can't speed it up. If it's seen as the 8 to 10 minute scene, it was the kind of scene that was really hard just to jump in at some point. I mean, I think once the action kind of starts, you can kind of do that, but going through it multiple times, just trying to figure out how to build this thing, because it's not cut like a traditional car chase, as you mentioned. So, one of the other things that we built into it was the road. We were out in the desert. We have these desert winds, ethereal howl that kind of happens a few times throughout that kind of creates this extra tension to everything. And there's the road noise, there's the wind, there's the desert. So it's just like all these elements. We just went through that thing a bunch of times, and we finally got to the point where like, I think we're there. I think we got it. I'm not sure what else to do. I think we got it.
Tricky when you take away like your normal palette of like things that you use in a car chase, whether that's like skids or buys, whatever it is. Like that chase has none of it. And like Chris was saying, it's cut different. Like it's kind of long in a good way ultimately, but like finding the shape of it, finding how to keep it fun and interesting and engaging, and not having it just be an engine that's like going at like 7,000 RPMs the entire chase. Like how to find dynamics within that, how to find the shape of it, how to keep it moving, how to keep the tension and anxiety up. Like it's such a different kind of scene. Like it took a lot to kind of get there. And Chris did a lot with the music too. Because again, like at points, like there's not a lot going on with the music. It is that ticking clock, that tension and stuff like that. And, that's kind of the beauty of it. But like, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot that kind of went into cracking the code on that one.
Yeah. And I think that because of the balance that you achieved between all the elements, it's just magical. I mean, the reason that sequence works so well is because of that exquisite balance that you achieved with elements. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And, that's in like the writing, and it's how Paul constructs the scene a little bit, right? Like there is like a build there that you get that, ultimately, it builds and it's like long and it's slow, but it does like build and it crescendos and it ends with the car crash. And then you get to like calm down again. And you get to just be with like the buffeting winds. That was a whole thing, because we're trying to find as much like detail. And
calm down. What are you talking about? Willis shoots him. Calming down.
Yeah, okay. She shoots him. You know what I mean? Yeah.
There's no calming down.
Well, after that, you know what I mean?
Right. I get you.
You get the winds and you get the scanner, and then you get into the acting, and you're kind of just there with Leo and Willa and stuff. But it all is, I feel like, starts with the way Paul constructs these scenes, whether it's the River of Hills or it's the intro, the riot scene. Like there's a scene we call The Boys, or I call it The Boys at least. It starts when Leo jumps out of Sensei's car. He tracks him up to the top of the hill, and then they start shooting at him. Like these are all just like massive, sprawling, like 20-minute long scenes that move and like keep you engaged. There's just a lot to do with them.
Maybe, Jose, can we change the subject a little bit? You mentioned earlier about the cameras that were used in this film and how noisy they were. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a bit more about that and how you tackled that issue? Well, what camera was being used for those that don't know?
The VistaVision. And that's a camera that runs film horizontally. It's a very noisy camera because it has to move a lot of material, basically. I mean, it's not as loud as IMAX, although I hear lately that the new IMAX is much, much quieter. I have a friend that worked on the Odyssey, and he's telling me that they didn't use any silent camera, just the new IMAX with the improved sound dampening. We started with the VistaVision with a blimp.
On the camera.
On the camera. And it was like, a 4 feet thing, monstrosity that had,
Wow.
a lot of foam, and it was impossible to move. At the second or third reload, it got jammed because that camera, tends to jam a little if it's not properly balanced. So basically, we ended up getting rid of the blimp, 15 minutes for a reload or something like that. And, for Paul, that was just like, no way. Some very intimate scenes, he brought out the Super 35, it shoots, 4 pairs, full frame. But most of the, big scenes were done with the VistaVision. So that's, again, like I was saying about the masking, try to find elements to mask that thing. And then with the performances, it's basically the ratio or the distance of the lavaliers, I think, was the only way to solve that problem. Many times the boom, had a lot of that background VistaVision sound. Sometimes, I guess, if the voice is strong enough, they can just cut around it and maybe filter a little bit. But mostly was, I think, the sound of the lavaliers in the movie.
Chris, you want to talk about tackling the camera noise on the mix stage?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I would ask either Andy or Paul. I mean, usually we're on the same, like, okay, where are the problems? They'd send us the scene, and between Rich Quinn and myself, he'd make a pass, basically get all the mics, get rid of tracks that weren't helping at all, just toss those, find the ones that were doing most of the work. We're constantly referencing their guide track as well, because that's kind of what they're used to. But in scenes like that, where there were problem spots, it would just be like, okay, we're just going to kind of go for it. We're very conscious about artifacting with any kind of noise reduction. We always start with a little bit less. So Rich kind of makes a pass where he kind of cleans it up. And then if I usually have all the elements, whereas Rich is kind of isolated with just the dialogue. When I get it, if I know there's music or backgrounds are playing and are kind of masking some of that noise, then I don't have to hit it as hard. And so we're always going for a more naturalistic sound. But then there's other times where you just kind of just go for it and just like you're just doing a lot of automation and clip gain of really trying to bring out all the syllables and the intelligibility of all the words. It certainly wasn't an easy one, but we did have a lot to work with and had an amazing team.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. As I said in the intro, I'm a big fan of this movie. I really enjoyed it. It was an excellent night out at the cinema. So thank you very much for all the efforts that you guys put in to make the movie as magical as it was. It was great talking to you all today.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks so much to Tony, Jose, and Chris. Next week's episode will be with Laia Casanova's supervising sound editor on Surratt. That episode was recorded live in front of a packed house in Toronto, and I'm really looking forward to getting it out in the world, as I think it was a really fun talk. Take some time this week to try and see Surratt in theaters if you can. It's well worth it. If you want to cheer on the best sound editing work that took place over the last year, including Chris Scarabosio that I just talked with today, who is nominated twice for One Battle After Another, get your tickets now for the Motion Picture Sound Editors Golden Reel Awards taking place on March 8th in Los Angeles. The awards start at 3 p.m. at the Wilshire E. Bell Theater in Los Angeles. Legendary producer Kathleen Kennedy will be getting the Filmmaker Award. Recent guest on Tonebenders Mark Mangini will be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Honor. And this past year's best-sounding films will be represented by the amazing sound artists that brought them to life. Patton Oswalt will be hosting, and dinner will be after the awards are given out. Tickets can be purchased now until February 25th by going to mpse.org. And remember, Motion Picture Sound Editor members get a sweet $150 off their ticket price. If you're planning to be in Los Angeles for the awards, consider coming a few days early on Thursday, March 5th to go to the 4th annual Tonebenders LA Sound Design Meetup, sponsored by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. This is a great night where you can hang out with old friends and colleagues and meet a bunch of new ones. Everybody that works in sound for movies, series, and games is welcome and encouraged to come. Last year, we kind of outgrew the previous venue, and we've now moved it to all-season brewing this year. I hope you can make it. It was a lot of fun last year, even though we were packed in pretty tight. This year should be even better with a bit of elbow room. Please feel free to tell anyone you think might be interested in coming out. If you work in sound design, post, or game audio, you already know how much time the right library can save you. For the month of February, get 50% off any Sound Ideas membership tier, no matter which level of access you need. That's half off of the entire professionally recorded sound effects catalog, from cinematic and broadcast to hard-to-find specialty sounds. Just head to sound-ideas.com and use the promo code TONEBENDERS50 at checkout. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues. Or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.
Thank you.